Hello everyone, welcome back to Parkitect campaign mode, and today's episode is going to be about Sakura gardens. So attract more visitors to this peaceful garden by adding amusement rides and shops while retaining its old charm. Be careful of building thrilling rides, however, as the guests visiting the garden prefer gentle, calmer rides. Interesting. So we need to have a cleanliness rating of 80%, surely that should be quite easy. 500 guests in the park. And the optional goals are a cleanliness rating of 70%, so surely we'll meet that on the way to the 80, and complete all non-optional goals by the end of October year 3. So I feel like the goals for this one are fairly easy, shouldn't be too much of a challenge, but let's get into the map and see what we've got. Okay, so I decided that before we jump into the actual map itself, we're going to have a look at what I did 4 years ago for this one, and this is like my Santorini Gardens style build, my Greek style build. It's actually better than I remember it. Some of the themings are a little bit basic, but yeah, I feel like I did quite a lot in. I mean, I feel like some of this is done with Construction Anarchy maybe, which obviously we won't be doing in today's playthrough. But I quite like some of the coaster interaction and this splash battle we've got down here, and yeah, it's actually quite a nice little composition, but I'm sure I can do something better now. And obviously for this one I just went wild with the theme and went for something completely different. We won't be doing that today. I want to stick to the Asian theme that the map is sort of designed to represent. So let's get into the new Sakura Gardens and start afresh. There we go then, a little trip down memory lane for me. Welcome to the new map then, Sakura Gardens. Let's put the price to 0 like we always do and put it on pause for a sec while we take a look at what we've got. So, lovely big park, huge area to fill actually. I think this is going to be quite a long one if we do decide to fill up the whole park. I love this little composition over here. I think that's really stunning. Just so simple as well, the pieces used for it, but this rock work here is fantastic, and just goes to show really what you can do with the base sort of game pieces. But yeah, that's all there is to it really. A big lake with a path going all the way around it, no rides or anything yet, so we've got fresh canvas. Obviously the guests prefer calmer rides, so we've got Carousel, Ferris wheel and Wave Swinger. We've got no thrill rides at all though, so I feel like I'm going to have to research that. Yeah, it's already set to thrill rides, so that's fine. Coaster types, we've got the Junior, Mini and Powered Coaster, so again pretty tame coasters. I feel like we'll need something a little bit beefier than that, but no transport rides and a calm river ride, which I think may be fun to build at some point in the campaign. So let's have a quick look shops wise. We've got souvenirs and umbrellas. I don't think I've seen the souvenir shop yet in the playthrough. I definitely don't think I've used it, I'm not sure. A vending machine is the only food still, so that's going to be a bit of a challenge, but we've got the cash machine as well, which can really come in handy. You know, once guests have been in the park a long time, spending too much money and they're running out. So scenery wise, really limited at the moment. I'm going to have to research scenery pretty soon, probably just the generic and the spooky stuff for now. So yeah, I think I'm pretty sure that this is more of a Japanese style theme, this one, so that's kind of what I'm going to go for. Not sure how I'm going to go about it. It's always difficult to try and make this style theming original, but we're just going to jump in and see what we can come up with. So I'll see you over in the first time lapse. Welcome into the first time lapse then, and firstly I must apologise if the video quality isn't as good as normal in this section of the video recording. I've always sort of used Bandicam for all my video recording stuff, these playthroughs, but it's been a real pain to sync the audio with the live portions, and they keep going out of sync for some reason once I'm in my editing software. So I don't know whether the problem is with Bandicam or with the editing software, but either way, I'm now trying OBS for the first time. So far I'm not impressed, because I feel like it's not as good video quality, but I'm going to have a play around with the settings after this time lapse and see if I can improve that at all. But if not, then we'll just see how it goes, basically. So first thing that I'm working on then, just to get into the style of the theming for this map, is just a little canopy over the entrance plaza. And it's very simple, it's just using some pillars, fences and roof pieces, and trying to have that traditional sort of nondescript Asian architecture. This could be anywhere really in Southeast Asia, I guess, or that sort of area. But yeah, trying to use a few different pieces and be a bit creative with it. Sort of set the tone for this map's theming and starting it off. I wasn't overly keen when I started this little building, but by the end of it I think it looks rather good. So we'll continue in this style. Next building then, and we're going to build the sort of main food court for the entrance area here. Don't know how realistic it would be to have a food court right near the entrance like this, to be honest, in a park, but it's something I tend to do, and that's not something I've given a lot of thought to really. It's just something I place down because it's handy for gameplay, but yeah, I don't know, I suppose it's not that realistic. You'd have your gift shops and stuff like that near the front of the park, wouldn't you? And then food courts a bit further back. So that might be something to consider for future. But this building is fairly straightforward, fairly standard Asian sort of non-specific architecture. I'd like to think it's Japanese inspired, but we're putting in some slated sort of walls. I don't know what the correct term for these are, but basically made from the fence pieces stacked up and recoloured, along with some text symbols and some thin pillars to give the small detailing effect. And then I'm just layering a couple of fences together as well above each wall piece to indicate some kind of nice temple style detailing that you quite often see on buildings with this style. I struggled a bit here to work out the roof size, and to start with, obviously this building looks horrendously big. The roof I've got on the back is just far too big, so I do go ahead and change that, which you'll see a bit later on. At this point I stick a staff room in there. That doesn't stay because it doesn't fit right for the place, for the size of the building, sorry. So you can also see I've chucked a carousel down, just because I think we only had one ride in the park and guests were already starting to get a bit annoyed, so I thought I'd better give them another ride. So that's why I put the carousel in. At this point I'm assuming that all the guests just want gentle, calm rides, like it sort of said in the introduction. That turns out to not really be the case, but I'll talk about that a little bit later on. At the moment I'm just doing a bit more detailing on the roof here, in the roof section. So I used a couple of the spooky pack pieces. So I think it's like the tombstone and something else from that pack, and they actually worked quite well for acting as sort of pillars and trims in a small space like that. So that's a detail piece that I might use a bit more in future because it worked out quite well. I wanted to give the effect of this being a slightly overhanging roof as well, and then the detail pieces are just inside. You can see now I've changed the size of the roof as well, and it looks much better like this. I still feel this building's a little bit on the large side, but it's much better than it was, and I think we can make it fit in with everything else that's around it, because the rest of the buildings you see me build in this time lapse are a fair bit smaller than this one. but it's fine. I think it's good to sometimes have a slightly larger building for something like this, and obviously the fact that it's raised as well on a platform sort of increases the height a bit as well. And then at this point I realised we're not going to have room for the staff room in there without making it horrendously big, so I got rid of the staff room. You can also see that I blueprinted everything at this point and gone back and started again. You can call this cheating if you like, I don't really mind, but the park was just doing rubbish. The guests were actually really difficult to please, and despite hardly building anything, I was rapidly running out of money because the guests were just moaning about everything, chucking rubbish everywhere, breaking bins. You know, vandalism was a big issue, so I thought we'll start again from afresh and I'll take it a little bit slower, and yeah, hopefully it works out a bit better this time. But I think guests were getting annoyed as well that there were no thrill rides. There are guests saying there's no high intensity rides in this park, so despite the fact that we're meant to be building for guests that like calmer rides, that doesn't seem to be the case. So in this second playthrough I do put a thrill ride in the park just to get things going, and that seems to do the trick a bit more, as well as putting quite a few janitors and security guards in, because yeah, guests just seem to be very messy and break stuff in this park and then moan that everything's broken and messy, so no pleasing them. But I'm sure once we start bringing a bit more money in, the park management will sort itself out. It usually does. Once you get an established park, it tends to the happiness rating still tends to stay pretty high unless you do anything dramatic to annoy the guests, like they will get stuck somewhere or something like that. Anyway, back to what we're actually building then. This food court's pretty much complete now, just covering up the customizable shops because they are visible from the isometric grid view, and recolouring, reshading the roof pieces. I did think I was going to probably use the fantasy roofs in this build because obviously they are the right style, but at this point they haven't come up in research. Well, I haven't researched any decoration or scenery pieces, so when we get to the point that they come up, if we do research them later on, I will probably use them on some other buildings, and that's fine. Yeah, because I went back in. This happens so many times. I keep losing this carousel and have to keep putting it back in. I think I ended up moving it as well later on in time lapse. But obviously, because I've gone back into the map and started it again, yeah, I have to keep replacing the carousel, which is rather annoying. Moving on then, I'm building a toilet. This is more like in the style of a little Japanese tea house sort of building, and I wanted to try and make it a little less gridded, so it's actually sort of 2/3 wall and a quarter not wall, if that makes sense. I really don't know how to explain what I'm trying to mean, but you can sort of hopefully see what I'm getting at visually by what I'm actually doing. I also used a technique that I taught myself absolutely ages ago in some sandbox park, which I probably had construction and a key for, so it made the trick a bit easier. But it's using the sort of step borders, the ones you can see that I've put down by the fence piece for this building, which we've moved away from now anyway. But yeah, I'll show you in the live section because I think that's quite a cool little trick, something that I'm quite pleased with. Moving on then, I thought it's time to put a coaster in the park, and I thought wooden coasters aren't too intense, but they carry a high excitement rating usually, so this should be perfect for the type of guests that are coming into this park. I had to take a loan out, as you can see there, or second loan even, but I do believe we start making money after this coaster is built. because we've got quite a few rides in the park now. But I did struggle a bit with the layout of this one. I was sort of... I'm not sure who would really manufacture a wooden coaster with this layout, because it's got some elements that are sort of very GCI, like the helix straight after the drop, but it's also got some elements that are more of a classic woody, like the out and back sort of feel to it. It goes in and out of itself quite a lot, but I still would probably say this is one of the more modern sort of wooden coaster manufacturers style layouts. But yeah, it took quite a lot of effort to find a layout that worked for what I was trying to do. I wanted to keep it fairly compact, because I've got an idea for another coaster in the park, or for some theming rather for another coaster, but it wouldn't work for this type of coaster, so I'm waiting for a bit more, for some more coasters to come up in the research before I can do that. But I don't want to use up, so I know we've got a lot of room in the park, but yeah, I didn't want to take up too much room with this woody, so I kept it fairly compact. And then I'm just trying to finish off bits of the layout. Ended up with a double down element there, which I thought was quite cool, bang in the middle of the layout. And then we're just going for some more sort of classic colours, keeping it fairly dark wood. But yeah, at this point I haven't got on to doing the station or anything like that. I mainly built this just to get the guest flow moving a bit and start making a bit of money. But yeah, I'm fairly happy with that layout. And then I decided to run a calm river ride underneath it as well, which I thought would look kind of nice. It does look like there's rather a lot going on, and it does take some of the supports away from the coaster, so that's something that we're going to have to bear in mind when we're doing all the theming for this area. But yeah, I think it's a nice layout for the river ride, nice interaction with the coaster, and it should be something that the guests want to ride in this park because it's calm. That's it for rides at the moment. Then I just wanted to build a canopy for this carousel. So I moved it about 73 times. Most of that's cut out of the footage. But then I literally just placed down some roof sections and, you know, made a nice canopy basically. Kind of similar to the ones I did in the last map actually, in Kaiserberg, using a similar colour, but obviously fitting it in with this theme much better as well. I'm using that trick again with the ampersand symbol from using the text symbol, using an ampersand to make sort of designs and stuff that could fit into this Asian theme as well. And yeah, I think this little canopy sort of nicely finishes off this area of the park. There's still a little polishing off to do in this area, but all in all, yeah, I think we're fairly good here. And you can see the park rating really isn't too bad at the moment, so I think hopefully we've turned a bit of a corner. But what we're going to do is jump over to the live section in just a sec, and I will see you all over there. Welcome back to the live section then, and this is the park so far. As you can see, this area is now fairly complete. I want to do maybe a bit more with the paths, because I'm just not sure what I think at the moment. I kind of feel like I want some pebbles underneath this canopy, but we haven't researched the piece yet that I'd need to do that, which I believe is here in flowers. We might not research it either, to be honest, but I'm doing decorations now because we've got a fair selection of coasters. None that I'm sort of over the moon about, but there's probably something we can make work in that selection. In terms of guest happiness, it's still not great. I did really have some problems with the littering and the vandalism and stuff, but I think that's calmed down a bit now. The main problem we've got is hunger and thirst. Apparently the vending machine just isn't cutting it, so that's annoying, because really I'm probably going to have to research shops just so that we get something in, that satisfies guests' hunger and thirst. So you can see what rides we've got so far. We've got the carousel, the wave swinger, and the, what's this called, orbiter. And then we've got our coaster and our car river ride as well. So I think we've got a good selection. Could do with an indoor ride really because of the rain in this map, but we won't worry about that for the time being. I've got an umbrella stall set up, and the umbrellas are very expensive. We're not actually making money at the moment, but I think that's just because I've been building stuff. Once we get enough guests on the coaster, once the trains start filling up, I think we should start making money. It's only the start of the month now, and we're sort of 500 down, so I think we'll start to break even. But I might have to just do a little bit of micromanaging before we continue building in this park. But yeah, I'll see you all over in the next time lapse, and I'm going to continue working this way and adding theming to everything we've got here. So yeah, see you over there. Welcome back to the time lapse then, and the first thing I'm working on is a food stall restaurant building. And the idea is to build up a bit of a main street in front of this wooden coaster and going along the park towards the back of the lake. And the idea for this really is, for putting a food building in here, is that the other one we've got at the moment is right at the front of the park, so it's quite a distance for guests to get to. And I wanted to do a sort of more like a sort of Japanese high street style build for this, and I put in a couple of other buildings as well that sort of complement it later on in the time lapse. And the idea is that it's a little bit more urban and less of the sort of picturesque rural Japan that we normally sort of imagine. So a little bit of a town sort of high street thing going on. Again, using several tricks here, including using the text to make different patterns. I thought about maybe using Japanese characters, but in the end I decided just to rip some characters from the character map in Windows, and they worked perfectly to make up this sort of fake font design, I guess. But it fits nicely with the theme, but it's not meant to replicate any real text, if that makes sense. Must also give a shout out to a creator called Ed36, who's doing a brilliant campaign playthrough at the moment on Parkitect. I have basically ripped off his idea of using these sort of metallic roof edge pieces to make an overhanging roof on these buildings, because it works perfectly for this style of build. So yeah, I've no shame there. I've just completely nicked your idea there. But yeah, go check out his channel, because that's Ed36. He's doing a fantastic playthrough at the moment of the campaign maps. So continuing with the build then, I am working on the wooden coaster station, which obviously has quite a bit of elevation. I put it quite high off the ground so that we could get the river ride in underneath it. Looks like I'm just connecting some pipes there as well. But yeah, I had to work out how to sort of make this blend in, and in the end I decided we will use the new pillar as rockwork and build up some different tiers as the queue sort of goes up through these gardens, sticking in some nice planting. I do end up varying the colour of the flowers a bit as well later on, because I felt it needed a bit more variation, so you will see that at some point. But now I get working on the coaster station building itself. using all the same pieces again, then the fence and just standard pillars really. There's nothing too special about this building, it's pretty standard. I wanted to get a bit of orangey red roofing in there because it's going to match some of the foliage that we've got around the ride as well. I was toying with having an overhanging roof go into the other bit of roof, but that didn't work at all. So just got the overhangs on the outside edges, and using the slightly wider one for this because it's a bit more of an elaborate roof. I was trying to make the coaster stations a little bit more fancy than some of the other buildings, or at least the roofs for them anyway. I think this is a really cool roof once we've finished doing all the colour modifications and whatnot as well. And I do a different trim on the top of this one as well. I use border pieces rather than that tombstone piece that we've been using, but I stick the tombstone pieces on the end and they seem to fit in perfectly with this border. Yes, I think I'm really I think that's worked out really well, having the sort of trims there to give the effect of what style it is. And again, it's like the pieces in Parkitect, I think that's part of the joy of the game, that with this art style it means you need to be a bit creative sometimes to come up with the themes that you want to do. So yeah, just finishing off some of the detailing then with the coaster station. Obviously we've got the rock work running all the way underneath to support it and to give the height difference that's required. I'm also adding in some more text symbols using that little trick to add detailing to the walls and whatnot. And I also add some lanterns in because we've got to think about lighting as well. And obviously this style of architecture has different lighting to what we normally use, so we use the lanterns because they fit in nicely with the theme, no other reason really. As you can see there, I'm just struggling a bit with getting things in the right place, and yeah, sometimes it's difficult to sort out the sort of smaller details of a build, but yeah, I think that worked out fine. So moving over to a different area of the park now, back towards the entrance, I just wanted to get the gravel in underneath this pavilion. Now that we've got the piece I require researched, and I felt like making this path a little bit more interesting, so I brought it out a little bit and add some curves to it, and we've got a bit of a viewing area now for the river ride and the coaster as well, which makes it all look a little bit more interesting, like I say. And I ended up sticking some pebbles and some gravel stuff in here as well, which I always think it's a fun sort of thing to add into the park, and it's a good way of covering an area when you don't know what else to do with it. So I use that quite a few times in this build actually. Adding in a few little detail pieces there as well next to the restaurant building, because I wanted to give the sort of idea that this is a busy working town, and there's lots going on. So the clutter, I want to try and add more of that in other places, but I just can't think what to put in. I've spent quite a long time looking at that actually, and not really knowing what to do. Might come back to that at a later stage. So adding in loads of foliage and bushes and plants etc. around the river ride. Nothing too special there, just obviously going with this colour scheme of the reds and the pinks. I don't really care how realistic it is, that's not important to me anyway. Yeah, just going for in-game aesthetics really, just wanting everything to look nice. And then I decided to do the station building for the river ride. This is my least favourite building so far in the park. I might go back and try and do something else with this because I'm not happy with how it turned out. Really, I think it's quite generic. And yeah, I just don't think it fits in that well with everything else I've done in the park so far. But for now, it's a placeholder at least anyway, and chances are I probably won't bother going back to change it, because once I finish the park I probably won't be bothered. But I just couldn't really think what to do for this, so I just kept layering it up and adding different parts to it, and yeah, whatever I did, I couldn't get it to look that great. It uses quite a lot of the same pieces as other buildings in the park, but because it's quite a big station to cover as well, it's that large area, makes it a bit more challenging. But I kind of stopped filming and carried on with the building and added a bit more to it, and it did look quite a bit better by the time I finished. So you'll probably see that in the next live section or the park tour anyway. Moving on then, back onto the main street. Like I said, I wanted to make this more of a high street type thing, so I'm adding in a toilet or restroom block using, again, similar pieces, but I realised that I hadn't made use much of the round window yet, which is perfect for this theme, so I decided to build something with the round window. And it's very elaborate, this, for a restroom or a toilet building, but I thought, yeah, let's have a fancy toilet and make use of the round window. So that's what I did. Other than that, just using the same styles. A lot of the buildings do have a lot of pieces and styles replicated across, and there is quite a lot of repetition in this build. But I think it works well, and I think using different colours and stuff would get enough variation to make it interesting. So now we get to the really fun part of the build, and we're putting our second coaster down, and we're trying to work out the layout to interact with a building that I'd had planned all the way through for this map, but just needed to wait for enough money to actually build it. And I thought it would work well with this tilt coaster, or at least I think that's what it's called. So it's basically one of those coasters, I think it's S&S or something like that. I'm sure I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, but it's sort of like more in prototype. I don't think there's many of these actually made. Again, that could be completely wrong, I really don't know. But either way, I thought this coaster type worked out pretty well for this theming idea that I had, which was basically for it to come out of this tower and then drop down over itself, over the station, and then do a load of other elements around itself. And we're going to heavily theme up this tower and station and try and make it look like it all belongs together, like it does. And you can see in the thumbnail how it turned out, obviously, but it did take quite a long time to put all this together and work out how it was all going to work. The layout came together pretty quickly, actually, as I decided sort of how I wanted everything to look, and it really helped putting in a sort of placeholder for the building as well, at the same time as building the coaster layout, because the whole thing just made sense to me then whilst I was building it. So it looks like it's actually supposed to be designed that way, not just a coincidence, and it means that you're not then having to build stuff around the track. It just means you've got room for everything to fit where you want it. The first thing that I did then, I shoved down some of these archways from the adventure set, and obviously they don't fit in well with the theme that we're going for, but I make them fit in basically, and I think what we end up with here is something halfway between sort of Mayan adventure style theming and Asian architecture. It mainly starts to make more sense when you see the roof, because to start with at this point I thought, although I'm following some concept art here, it's not really in the style of the rest of the map, and it's not exactly what we're going for, but then the roof does tie it in with the Asian theme, and I think the roof makes the whole tower look a lot better. So at the moment I'm just trying to add some details here, such as some trim pieces and some wall brackets to hold everything together. Obviously you can see that I've done a custom pillar down the side. That does stay and get repeated over, but we add a little bit more detail to it later on to give it a bit more interest, because the problem is sometimes with the basic shapes they're very bland texture. I like loads of detail in my builds, so I like to add a bit more to them. But yeah, we're putting in some pillars now, and you can see I'm starting to take away the placeholder wall and decide what other elements we're going to have in this build, and then I start working on the roof, which is the main focal point, I guess, of this building. There's a very elaborate roof structure, and really it's just 2 layers and some different sort of shaped pieces, I guess, but it's all put together pretty much using the fantasy roofs, so I'm very glad that we got them in the research for this map. Otherwise I would not have been able to do this as well. But I also do have to use some top pieces that are just plain roofs and coloured in the same, because we don't have that in the fantasy set. Sorry. Obviously, it's only recently that we've got these different styles of different pictures and stuff of fantasy roofs that came with the free update, and they are so useful because they work perfectly for this style of theming as well. So yeah, you can see the roof's sort of half done now, and then I leave it to do something else before coming back to it. I do tend to jump around quite a lot from this build. Oh no, that's not the case. Sorry, I finished it, but not on camera obviously. Sometimes when I'm recording I just forget when I paused it and when I haven't, so I think there is a little bit lost there, but basically I add in some steampunk style pieces as well, because it just adds to the detail of the different layers of roofing. But you'll see that a little bit more clearly a bit later on. At the moment it looks like I'm working on some of the walls, so sorry if you could hear my microphone make a noise, and I had to remove my finger from the how I'm holding the pop filter, because I do this so professionally. The pop filter just sits on top of the microphone. I don't really know if it even works that well, to be honest, but it's fine. We've got commentary, that's the main thing. What was I talking about? Yes, so this wall is obviously a sign with a custom art piece that I've googled and then just modified a bit in Photoshop, just to give it the sort of filter that I want on it, and I think that works fairly well. We've put in some custom text signs as well to add a bit more detail, and I tend to do that on most of the pillars and walls and stuff on this build. And then the other pieces I'm using here is a fence, which I did in the last map actually. Use a fence as a wall because it's like a slightly more detailed wall. Now we can recolour it, and that's just a wooden fence. And using loads of pillars and text again to add the trim pieces and the pillars to try and make it fit more with the Asian theme. But now you can really see how it's sort of all working together quite well, despite looking a little bit adventure-y to start with. And some of the pieces we use are a little bit adventure-y, but yeah, maybe it can be a hybrid of themes. I don't really know what it's supposed to be, but I like how it looks, and that's the main thing. Yeah, if you're happy with your builds, then don't worry about it, it's all good. As you can see, I've also changed the coaster track colour back to blue, back to a sort of mid-blue, because the red clashed a bit too much. There's a bit too much red in the actual build already, so I thought we'll go back to a blue colour. That works out a bit better. And then finally I'm just adding a jumper ride because I think I was quite near the guest count at this point, so I decided to place down another flat ride and also open up the coaster so that guests start heading towards this part of the park. You can see I've pretty much finished covering up the coaster station as well. I do think I need to add a little bit more to this to sort of make sure it's clear that it's joined to the tower as well, so it's all one building. So it kind of looks like two parts at the moment, but yeah, this is still very much a work in progress, this area. So we will go back to that, but because we're so close to meeting the goals, I think I fancy doing another live section. So once this is over, we'll jump over to that. But there's a couple more things that I add here. I do add a pavilion at the front of the queue line, and that's just to symbolise really that this is the entrance to the coaster, and to give the path a bit of protection from rain and hot sun and everything like that. So in terms of the station and everything, other than a bit more detailing, I think everything's pretty much there. Like I said, I just need to tie it all in a bit better together. But then there's other areas of the coaster that I think need to be themed up a bit and not just left plain. However, the last thing I do here is add some foliage in, and I think it really starts looking better once the foliage is in as well. So yeah, with all that being said, we'll jump over now to the live section, and we will see how the park is doing now. So I'll see you all over there. Welcome to the live section then, and here we are in Sakura Gardens in its current state. As you can see, we are racing towards the goal completion. I have just stuck a TV advert on for the park, that seems to be working its magic. We're already sort of just above the 500 mark, but now we're nice and clear of it, so in a month's time we should be winning the goals, completing the goals. So I'm going to show you this building in a little bit more detail then, because obviously we rushed through it a bit in the time lapse. This is how it turned out. It's sort of what I dreamed of and expected. You know, when you're planning something for a while, you're like, I'm going to build that. You see a really cool reference image and you think, I'm going to take inspiration and build that. That's what I did. But I put all my heart and soul and love into this tower, and I feel like everything else looks a bit bland. I'm not sure if this station works with the tower as well as I want, so I am going to continue with that. Obviously this is unfinished as well, so I need to do a bit more with that, and I'm not entirely happy with the pavilion here either. I think it needs a bit more detail, or just something more to it. But yeah, in terms of the coaster itself, it's performing pretty well. Very high excitement and medium intensity. Obviously the decoration's amazing as we put this together. So yeah, it's in terms of gameplay now, we're doing really well. The goals are 500 guests and 80% cleanliness rating, so obviously we've got no problems there. We've got a high park rating. I'll just show you some of the other stuff we've got going on without going into too much detail, because we'll do that at the park tour at the end. But this is our main street now. This is how it looks, and this is our entrance area, which it feels like I built this ages ago now. It was only a couple of weeks ago. But it's funny because I think I need to do some polishing off in this area to tie everything in together. I've sort of themed these flat rides-ish, but this has still got the generic fences, so yeah, there's still bits and bobs left to do. Oh, I was going to show you this building, wasn't I? That's how it ended up looking. I'm not completely happy with it, but I think it's just going to have to do, to be honest, because I can't really be bothered to take it apart and build a new one. But yeah, this is what we've got so far. If we zoom right out, it's all small areas of detail condensed down, and then big open areas. So we need to tie everything in a bit better together. But I might reroute this path down here rather than having it going all the way up here, because we've still got to finish this side of the map. But I don't know if I'll do as much with this side. Maybe just a couple of flat rides and shops, and then keep it as a nice gardens area, because this is where all the greenery is. But yeah, we'll see. First thing I'm going to do when we get back to the time lapse is finish off this building. I'm now just going to cut to when we inevitably meet the goals, and yeah, we'll finish off the live section by meeting the goals. The absolute anxiety is killing me here because it started dropping and I thought it might go below 500, but no, there we go, we've done it. All goals completed besides the optional goal, which was October year 3, which I don't think would have been that hard, but I like to not have to worry about that now and not focus on it. So there we go, that's the challenge done. And we'll move on now to finishing the park and obviously finishing off this, what we've got going on here. So I'll cut back to the time lapse and I'll see you all over in the final time lapse. Welcome back to the final time lapse, and this section really didn't take as long as I thought it would. We managed to get the bulk of the build done and finish off the park, which is good, obviously. So the first thing I'm doing is working on this entrance pavilion and just giving it a little bit more detail. I added a black trim around the top, and I think that makes it look a little bit nicer. And then just finishing off some of the details with this station building as well. I decided all we need to do really is colour the pillars red to make it fit in a bit better with the tower, and that will seem to work out quite well. I didn't really add much more detail to that station. And then I just worked on this cover for the section of track that comes out of the tower, and again that was pretty straightforward. Didn't add too much detail to it, just sort of polished it off with some roof textures like we've used in other parts of the park, and using the same fence and borders and trims etc. for the underneath bit. And that pretty much polishes off this whole area. I do end up adding quite a bit more foliage, and later on I come back and do the supports as well. I also added some rock work there that I kind of forgot about, and I think that works quite nicely with all the other elements we've got there. Oh yeah, I did a transfer track building as well. I did this like only a week ago, but I've completely forgotten what I've actually done here. But yeah, it's got a transfer track, this coaster. The other coaster in the park doesn't have one because I just couldn't find room for it, and I kind of forgot to go back to it and look again, to be completely honest. But you know, I try and add a transfer track when I can for the realism element, but it doesn't always matter, I suppose. And it's a very simple building, just using the same roof as the rest of it, and covering it up a bit with foliage, because you don't want this to be too much on plain sight for the guests. And then I make a little backstage area as well. Toyed with having a bit of path work there, but in the end I just decided to cover the ground with concrete texture, and I feel like that worked out much better. And again, just using foliage to cover that up from guest view, so you can still see a little bit of it obviously from the isometric grid, but I wanted to, you know, make sure that from guest level it wouldn't all be visible. I've also put a staff room in there, which we do cover up in a slightly different style, but I'll go back to that in just a minute. At the moment I just wanted to finish off some of this area, so some more pebbles, and jumping around a little bit here actually by the looks of it. Yeah, it's kind of hard to keep up with what I've done in this time lapse. I decided that transfer track needed a bit more detailing, so I'll go back and do that, and then a bit of fencing, and I believe I used one of the new fences all the way around the back as well, and coloured in the same colour as the path, and it works quite well actually. I didn't do anything crazy with the path work around there, just adding the things you need, so the benches and the lampposts, and it's all a pretty plain area really. The coaster itself is the highlight of this area, and then just adding some more pebbles down there. And yeah, at this point I think maybe this is when I go for the fence. Yeah, I have to remove all of the little wooden post ones first, sticking some more trees in there as well. And like I say, it's really all over the place this last time lapse because it was just finishing off really every other part of the park that needed finishing. And it really, like I say, really didn't take me too long. I probably could have done a bit more with this park, but I felt like what we had was sufficient. There was plenty in the park. We've met the goals, and I've tidied up every area that we've got quite nicely. So here we're just putting some more benches in and a little seating area so that guests can sit by the lake and look across, and putting fences and everything where they need to be. Now you can see I'm covering up the staff room, and yeah, using a slightly different style here, but keeping with similar styles that we've got all around the park. I tried to make a rounded window in a different sense there, slightly sunken in one, using several of the round windows layered up. I think that looks quite cool, and I'm actually quite impressed with this little staff room cover. I also used some basic shapes just to add a bit more detail to it really. So layering a couple of spears on top of each other worked out quite nicely. And then I'm working a little bit on the main street, a little bit on this area behind the coaster, and yeah, basically doing lots of bits and bobs where they needed to be done. And yeah, I also added in a staff sort of dining area here, a staff seating area, and I thought that once I'd done that, we don't actually have one for the guests anywhere in the park, so I thought it doesn't really make sense not to have a guest seating area, so I do exactly the same type of seating area for the guests over just next to this main street, and then add a bit more planting and some more foliage and whatnot, and that pretty much finishes off this little section of the park quite nicely. So with that, we sort of move on to the final area of the park, which is obviously quite a large space to cover because we've got this whole left side of the lake, and I decided I wasn't going to put another coaster in or do loads of crazy theming or anything like that. I just put a couple of utility type buildings in, like the one you're seeing here, so a restaurant type building and one ride, and then the rest was just lots of plants, foliage, etc., just to finish off this area. So this is going to be the more gardens area of the park, the more nature inspired part where you've got the high street and stuff over the other side of the lake. This is a lot more peaceful and tranquil, I guess. So I wanted to bear that in mind with the type of buildings that I was putting in. So I kept this one fairly straightforward, but went a little bit more custom with the walls, and then used basic shapes here to get a little bit more of an off-grid design to it. And it worked quite well because it sort of gives the impression of overhanging roofs as well. And I did a little bit of custom stuff with some of the windows here, and some of the shapes as well, just to try and mix it up a bit and give a bit of variation from some of the other buildings in the park, but obviously still keeping in mind the same theming and where this park would be located. So yeah, it's always a little bit more difficult when you're playing slightly off-grid like this to get things in place, but obviously the blueprint trick here, or using the blueprints, really did come in handy for placing things exactly where I needed them without having to keep doing it. And then just finishing off the roof, I added a couple more layers to it. Don't know if this really makes sense the way I've done it, but with the pieces that I've got available, it just sort of worked out fine. And then on the top again, I use a plain roof because sometimes you just have to do that if you haven't got the right piece. And then the detailing on the edge of the roof pieces is what really made this sort of come together. And for some reason I quit to the map there and then go back in. No idea why I did that at that point. Actually I do now, I remember the game just started playing up for some reason and gave me a random, you know, I don't know if this happens to anyone else, but sometimes when you're building pieces and then you click out of the scenery items or whatever, and it's just got a random path and you can't use the cursor to click on anything. I don't know if that just happens to me. All the mods that I've messed around with in the past have sort of broken my game or something. I also for some reason can't upload anything to the Steam Workshop anymore and haven't been able to for like several years. But yeah, I'm really not sure why these things happen, but there you go. Working on the last building then, or the last main building for the park, which is just a cover for a twister, I believe I put in there. And this is a really simple one. Again, using the same fancy roofs, using the high-pitched one as well there to give it a little bit more emphasis. And I actually like this cover. I think it's simple but effective, works really well. And then that really is it for the majority of the park. I decided to torture myself by putting some custom supports onto this swinging coaster, and it really didn't take that long because the layout's quite compact, so I was able to do this quite quickly, cut quite a lot of the footage out as well because it's not always the most entertaining to watch people put custom supports on a coaster for ages. But yeah, it seemed to work out absolutely fine. I'm just using the standard pillars, the round pillars, and using basic shapes on really small grid space, or really scaled down rather, for the ones that didn't quite have the right height, and then using chimneys for the footers, which isn't particularly realistic, but I think it does add a nice aesthetic to it, and I started doing that earlier on when I built the coaster. So that is it for the time lapse. We'll now jump over to the final park tour, and I'll see you all over there. Welcome to the completed Sakura Gardens map. And you can actually see now how big this map really is, how much space we had to work with. This is as fully zoomed out as the game will let me go. And yeah, it really is a big space. You could make a huge park in this map if you wanted to. But I think what we did here was enough, and I'm really happy with some of the detailing, some of the themed areas we've got. So let's jump into the entrance plaza and look at our beginnings of the park, because it did sort of progress in an interesting way and took on different styles, but still in the Asian sort of theming idea throughout. So this is our first building, which is a restaurant building. I really like the little detailing we've got here and the different roof pitches. This is before I had the fancy roof pieces researched, so I was just using plain roofs, giving a bit of recolouring and doing some various overhanging sections on them. and I particularly like how this one turned out as well. I think that's quite a fancy path cover for a carousel. So as we move on then, I've added a little bit of pebble stuff here, and yeah, just minor details and theming and stuff, and I've kept in quite a lot of the foliage that was already in the map to start with. Got some slightly more exciting rides here. Then we've got the chair swing. I've done a cover for that, and we have very simple covers for these two flat rides as well, just with the roofs matching the colour of the queue line, and I think that works well enough. We've got one of these, can't remember what it's called, and a wipeout over here, and we've got our calm river ride here as well. This is how the station turned out for this one. I think I might have shown you in the last live section actually, and I think it's fine. It's probably my least favourite station in the park, but yeah, it does the job. And yeah, it's just a nice calm river ride, obviously, that goes underneath the coaster and through some nice gardens. I'm not going to show you an on-ride type of thing for this because it would just take way too long. There's no need. And that brings us on to our high street, or our main street, which obviously isn't near the park entrance, but I felt this worked out like quite a good place to put a little bit of a town. When I say that, really it's only two buildings and a coaster station, but it's got that sort of vibe to it, that sort of feel. I've added a few little clutter pieces up here and down here. I wanted to do a bit more of that, but I just didn't really know what to do for it, so I just left it in the end. This building I really like, and this one actually I think they work really well together. They've both got unique styles, but using some of the same pieces to make them sort of work together well. And yeah, this is a food store. It could be selling like street food or something, I suppose, and it's not. It's selling burgers. We do have a Chinese food store somewhere in the park as well, even though this is meant to be a sort of Japanese theme really. But let's take a ride on our first coaster then, the wooden coaster. Didn't give this one a name, didn't get round to it. It's got a high excitement of 67.1 and a low intensity. And we will just fast forward a bit until people get on the ride, and then we will take a ride on it if they want to get on. There we go. So it starts off dropping down into a helix, and we've got a couple of interlocking helixes there. I'm quite happy with the layout for this one. I think it turned out quite well actually. It goes straight into the lift hill after the first helix, and we're going to speed that up a little bit. I'm trying to keep the video length down. And then into our first drop, and a huge big helix, and then into a diagonal section which nicely breaks up the grid, and then we go down to the side of the lift hill there in that drop, and then another helix into an S-bend, and then a big drop and another big drop straight away. So I think that section will be really fun. It'll feel quite fast, I reckon, in real life. We come back round then into a double drop, into a small helix, smaller than I wanted to have really, but it's the only way I could sort of finish off the layout realistically, and I think it works quite well because there's a lot of interaction with other bits of the track there. And then obviously into the brake run and back into the station. So let's move on with the park then. We've got our seating area here in front of the lake, using a couple of different styles of benches, which I think works out quite well. Sometimes it can look a bit plain if you're just using the same benches everywhere, which I usually do. We've got our wipeout here, really like, sorry, not our wipeout, our jumper. Really like the colour of that one actually, interestingly. And then we've got our covered up staff room and our transfer track for the coaster, and here is our swinging coaster. This is what it looks like in all its completed glory. You can probably see from the thumbnail. This is my pride and joy of the park. And we did give this one a name. It's Kenji's Revenge. Not sure what that means now, I can't remember what I went for there. But it's got a high excitement of 60.8 and a medium intensity of 30.2, and the decoration rating is amazing. This would be like a family thrill coaster, I guess. So it starts off the layout with an elevator lift, which obviously you don't see, and then goes straight into the first drop, and then all these helixes, basically just a series of twists and turns, which is, I guess, what this coaster type is meant to do. I don't know if it's supposed to have slightly more intense track sections and invert maybe in real life, I'm not sure. One thing I didn't sort out there is the operations does stall a bit on the brake run there, which is a shame. Completely forgot about that, to be honest, but never mind. And then it goes back in through the tower and down to this little helix on the lake. I think the layout is quite cool actually. What I'm going to do, I'll show you it from another angle, because a lot of that you probably couldn't see due to how the tower is positioned. Got them about to get onto the next car now. The one at the front, don't we? It only seems to be running free as well, which I guess is something to do with the drop sections. The block sections. But I'm really not fussed. It's fine, free's enough. So yeah, after it does the elevator lift, actually it turns round in that tower and goes into the first drop. And then these are the helixes and the twists a little bit more clearly. Hopefully it won't stop this time, but it has. That is a shame. I should have sorted that out before filming this, but I don't have time now. But the second section of the ride is quite janky. If you see this, the turn it just went round then, that's extremely janky, and I did try and fix it in a later part of the build, but it just, yeah, it didn't. There's no other way I could have done it. So yeah, let me show you that a little bit closer up, the actual pure jankiness of this track section here. It's amazing. Look at that. That would definitely break someone's neck in real life. But it's because I needed this dropped curve straight into an S-bend. And that's just how it turned out. I think it's because I wanted to get it to go back into the tower, bang in the middle. So, yeah. That is our coaster. Our, what's it called again? Tilting coaster, spinning coaster, something like that. Twisting coaster, I can't remember what it's called now. Swinging coaster, that's the one. So let's move on then and take a look at the latest part of the park. And this building turned out fantastic, I think. Really different, really a lot more tranquil than the buildings on the other side of the park, a lot less chaotic. And I think it just worked out really well. And we copied the same style across for the toilet block here as well. That's really just because I needed one of those in this area. That's the only reason I put it in. Everything here I've kept the same. The lovely garden area that we've got here. And yeah, the only other thing I did put a fantasy style roof on top of this pavilion for a bit more detail. And obviously adding extra bits of foliage in here and there. But that is about it really. And there's a quick look at our twister pavilion as well, or cover rather. Very simple stuff there, but it just ties it all in nicely. So there we go, that is it then for Sakura Gardens. I really enjoyed doing this one. I don't think the goals were too challenging. They were to start with. I did have a bit of an issue with vandals and litter for some reason, but once that was all sorted out, everything went really smoothly, and I quite easily made the goals for this one. So yeah, quite a fun scenario to play. I'm going to save it one more time, but I'm going to save it over here so that it's my screenshot for the map, which is, you know, something that I like to do. And you can see Kaiserberg speed run up there as well, which I've also just done. So if we quit to the map, you'll see what we've got. So that's it. We've completed Sakura Gardens with one coin. I will speed run it at some point and get the other one. And I've now got both for Kaiserberg. that was a nuisance to do actually. But anyway, moving on. We've got a choice of 2 maps that we can head to next, Silica Slopes or Disaster Peaks. I think I'm going to do Silica Slopes next because it's, firstly, I reckon it will be easier, quite a bit easier, and secondly, it's not too big a map. It is also the last campaign that I have played in Parkitect, so I started on it but I never finished it, so obviously I'm going to start a new one now. But it means that everything else is new to me, completely new, because I've never played through them before. Obviously I've seen everyone else's playthroughs of them on YouTube, but I haven't done them myself yet. And having said that, there's only 2 or 3 maps after this, so we are actually quite near the end of this series now. But yeah, I'll see you all in the next one for Silica Slopes. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.